Hi, I'm Don West, National Trial Counsel for CCW SAFE. On Saturday night, October 17, 2015, CCW SAFE member Stephen Maddox was attacked in the parking lot of a small convention center in Wilson, North Carolina. Stephen had to defend himself and wound up shooting his attacker several times. Unfortunately, Stephen's attacker died, and that evening Stephen was arrested for murder. Stephen Maddox had never been in trouble before. He had certainly never been in a violent encounter that resulted in him having to defend his life. Stephen assumed that if he cooperated with the police, if he answered their questions and allowed them to do their job, that he would be cleared right away. Stephen agreed to a gunshot residue test of his hands and even pointed out to the officers that he was left-handed and that was the hand he used when he fired the gun. Stephen told them about a box cutter type knife that he had on his keychain that he had used to defend himself during the first attack inside the convention center earlier that evening. Stephen told the police about a second attack that occurred moments after the first attack as he was leaving the convention center on his way to his motorcycle. Instead of investigating that attack, however, by interviewing witnesses and attempting to collect physical evidence, they assumed Stephen was lying about that and used that false conclusion to taint nearly everything else they did. Stephen agreed to waive his Miranda rights and be interviewed on tape. Overall, that interview took over 3 hours. Everything Stephen said was scrutinized and dissected, often taken out of context, and was attempted to be used by the prosecutor as the primary evidence that Stephen was guilty of first-degree murder. For nearly 3 hours of this interview, Stephen wasn't even aware that his attacker had died. In fact, Stephen was asking about getting a restraining order against his attacker when the police finally told him that his attacker was in fact deceased. Up to that point, Stephen was confident that as soon as his attacker was interviewed, that all this would get straightened out and he would be cleared. Even after learning that his attacker had died, Stephen remained confident that as soon as the police questioned the witnesses, they would learn the truth and the charges would be dropped then. He went so far as to identify by name and provided the phone number of a person he thought may have been an eyewitness to the shooting. This witness wasn't interviewed by the police for 21 months, only until about a month or 6 weeks before the trial. In hindsight, there seems little doubt that had Stephen not provided a detailed statement, but rather provided basic information and then requested an opportunity to meet with counsel first, it seems unlikely that he would have been charged at all. In some of our informational videos, we recommend to our members involved in a shooting that the member advise law enforcement that he or she has been attacked and had to defend himself, to point out important evidence or witnesses, and then decline to give a full interview until after having had the opportunity to speak with counsel. This is for several reasons, and all of them are underscored and emphasized in Stephen's statement to the police. First, undergoing a vicious attack, one so serious that you have to defend yourself with deadly force, will result in you being traumatized. You may not know it at first, and you may feel fully capable of providing a detailed statement. The problem is that much of what you say may very well be wrong or incomplete or out of sequence, and try as hard as you might, it's likely that you will say things that will form the basis of the prosecutor and the police claiming that you lied. All that happened to Stephen. But in fact, when you look carefully at the things that we know are true, Stephen got several things just plain wrong and that no one knew about. He misstated the number of children, for example. He misstated his work address. He misstated where his daughter was going to college. All of these things he clearly knew, but he got them wrong because he wasn't thinking clearly, having just survived the fight for his life. Many of his answers were incomplete because either his mind was racing or before he had truly finished his answer, the police redirected him to some other point, so he never finished. Sometimes his emotion didn't appear to be appropriate on tape, and certainly that got comments later. He forgot to mention critically important things that were proven by other means. For example, in Stephen's 911 call, he stated that he and his attacker were on the ground when he fired the last couple of shots. This is critically important information, but Stephen never mentioned it in his recorded interview. In fact, we hired an expert forensic pathologist to review the forensic evidence, and he found clearly that there was gunshot residue on the deceased's clothing that established that the gun was fired at least twice while Stephen and his attacker were on top of each other on the ground. As helpful as Stephen was trying to be, with confidence that what he said would be used to clear him, his misstatements and incomplete answers actually became the core of the prosecutor's case against him. Even when other evidence showed that Stephen was mistaken or that the conclusions that were being taken by law enforcement were incorrect, rather than doing more investigation in search of the true facts, law enforcement and then the prosecutor doubled down and offered theories and views of the evidence that were clearly against Stephen, even in the face of other compelling evidence of innocence. When Stephen was arrested, the police told him that he was being held for an open count of murder. Within a few weeks, Stephen was indicted for first-degree premeditated murder. This is the most serious offense in the state of North Carolina and is eligible for the death penalty.